90.1 FM, KKFI, Kansas City, Community Radio.
The views and opinions of this program are those of its host and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 90.1 FM, KKFI, Midcoast Radio Project, or its staff and volunteers.
My story, sad story now. Still waiting for the truth to be told now. Whoa, whoa, whoa. It won't be long now. Won't be long. Heard the news, heard your rivers all run dry. And on TV, I see missiles in your sky. Word is out. Loud whispering going on. Oh, angels turn mercenaries coming 10,000 strong. Oh, love and Euro, motherland, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, love and Euro, black and white sand. Oh, love and Euro, motherland. Whoa, love and Euro, black and white sand. Motherland, I know you love your family, yeah. Break the chains and set yourself free, yeah. Sound the drums, bring the children to the fold. The grand reunion, the war is getting cold. Oh, love and Euro, motherland, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, love and Euro, black and white sand. Whoa, love and Euro, motherland. Whoa, love and Euro, black and white sand. My story, sad story now. Still waiting for the truth, your story now. I know it won't be long. Won't be long, won't be long. No, it won't be long, no. I see children wearing medals in their bags. Where did the train slip off the track? I wanna know now. Sign reach hell, promoted throughout the world, with a picture of a little boy and a little girl. Whoa, na na na, blood is red, it's different shades of color.
You tuned to 90.1 FM, KKFI, Kansas City Community Radio. This is Urban Connections. I'm your host, Donna Wolfe. In studio with me today, Lloyd Daniel, educator, author, activist. Welcome back to KKFI and Urban Connections, Lloyd.
Thanks for having me, Donna. I appreciate it.
Great to have you here with us once again. You've been a very outspoken educator and activist and thinker down through the years, a revolutionary thinker down through the years. And certainly there are a lot of things going on these days that we need to be learning about, thinking about, questioning. And today you're going to share with us parts from your commentary on Afghanistan, the truth about Afghanistan and the end of empire. Tell us about that, if you will.
Well, it's a commentary that's gotten a lot of circulation and largely support. Haven't had a whole lot of negative comments. But it basically talks about why we're in Afghanistan, which is another resources thing as opposed to protecting America. Like Iraq, it's largely a jack move. They don't talk about the diamonds and gold and uranium and copper, etc., that is in Afghanistan that has been the target of pirates and other adventurers for centuries. And the Afghan people have, as weak as the central government is, they have always had a tradition of repelling foreign invaders for whatever reason. And the United States is finding the same sort of situation that the Soviets found when they were there for 10 years and killed over 1 million people. The United States is pulling out because it's wise to do that. There are some nations you shouldn't jump on or try to occupy: Somalia, Afghanistan, some others. But many people say that the defeat in Afghanistan and all the money the Soviet Union spent was the straw that broke the camel's back that led to the unraveling of the entire nation.
The entire Soviet
Right.
nation, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
So what is it about Afghanistan that's made it the target of so many invasions for the last several centuries from so many different nations?
Huge deposits of natural resources, global positioning, where it is in terms of being near the Caspian Sea. That's one of the things why they're there now. That's Halliburton and ExxonMobil and Shell and these people. They want to build a pipeline through Afghanistan to the Caspian Sea, and if they don't have Afghanistan under their heel, they won't be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So just like in Libya, those same companies signed those agreements with the so-called insurgents, supported by French, British, and American intelligence. It's usually about profit over people, profit over people's right to self-determination, dignity, etc. It's a pirate-like foreign policy. That's one of the things that I've been at odds with some of my colleagues about, that if Bush was wrong on foreign policy, Obama's just as wrong, and maybe even more so. I'll probably end up voting for Obama because there's really no alternative now. I'll probably end up voting, well, Democrats, progressives used to have to vote for the lesser of two evils. This time I think I'll have to vote against the Republicans, so actually vote against the eviler of two lessers.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, I'm sure that we couldn't have envisioned back in 2008 that we would be talking this way right now about President Obama.
Well, a lot of people don't, because they don't want to talk about him because they're black and he's black. But black don't make it right. You dip evil in chocolate, that don't make evil right. Obama is handicapped and strapped down by the Congress on domestic affairs, but he's all to the right of the Republicans on international affairs. He has made some mistakes, but what president wouldn't? But the point is, no matter who the president is, you can criticize him. He's not above criticism. He can make some mistakes, like the mistake he made to bail out those banks and not insisting that they put some of that money back in small business development to create some jobs. That would have been an easy move. But there are those who say he was naive and just thought they would do the right thing. I say, he's from Chicago. He's not that naive. I think he knows, as he said, he don't have to raise $1 billion if he's going to be reelected. There's no need to bite the hand that will feed that campaign. I think that was the approach.
And what I'm hearing of late is that President Obama's campaign has received more money in donations from Wall Street than the Republicans.
That's right. They trust him. He made Geithner Treasury Secretary. I mean, he was one of the people responsible for the crash on Wall Street. So, no one is above criticism, myself included, and you too.
Yeah, sure.
But just because he's black, that doesn't make him impervious to criticism. Clarence Thomas is black. Herman Cain is black. Clarence Pendleton was black. Ward Conley is black. So I'm saying, if you're wrong, you're wrong. Idi Amin was black. That doesn't make you anti-African if you criticize Idi Amin.
Absolutely.
Or some kind of sellout if you don't support Clarence Thomas. I remember people who had never read his work when he was running the first time or trying to get appointed, who had said, we got to support this black man. I said, do you know what he says? Did you know he's opposed to affirmative action, even though he had a $250,000 scholarship to Yale that was an affirmative action scholarship? And now every time he gets in office or gets a piece of a ruling coming across the Supreme Court, he votes against it. But he never says anything. People don't know that no Supreme Court justice in the history of America has ever gone a complete session without saying a word. This is the beginning of his 5th session as Clarence, Mr. Silent, Thomas.
Well, do you suppose that's because he doesn't know what to say, or in saying something, then he actually takes a position that he might have to defend later on?
I do not know. I think he got psychological problems. He had his wife jumping up and telling Anita Hill she ought to apologize for what she said. She's speaking the truth. They had other people standing in line to say the same thing. She can't help it that her husband's a pervert, but she needed, come out of denial and recognize it.
Interesting. Also, her
press
career.
conference.
Yeah, her career.
And they got $800,000 from the Koch brothers, and he didn't report it on his expense account, and nothing happened. When Charlie Rangel, who had been head of Ways and Means, a Democrat, when he got popped for not reporting the money he was making off the condos and apartments in the Caribbean, he lost his position, lost chairmanship. He's like a freshman now.
Yeah, reprimanded heavily.
Right, but $800,000 he forgot. Didn't until the New York Times put it out. He didn't even. He wasn't going to announce it, declare it.
Absolutely.
So I'm saying that you can criticize anybody. When Obama's right, he's right. Like on health care. But when he's wrong, he's wrong. You can't let his ethnicity keep you from criticizing. I voted for him too. Yeah. But I have been disappointed, especially with his foreign policy.
Speaking of his foreign policy, talk about Libya and the recent events that have taken place there.
NATO, the North Atlantic Terrorist Organization, can, if they focus on it enough and economic sanctions and all that, they can force anybody out. Mm-hmm. And it's a message that a lot of African nations now see, and that's one of the reasons they're in the Congo now. Supposedly advisors, but there's always an excuse or a rationale for invading somebody. That's what I was telling my friend, that it's odd and a little bit disappointing that the first black president has, along with a bunch of has-been former colonial powers, invaded Africa. So that's disappointing. But the right to self-determination is something that Americans would never give up, and it's wrong to deny that to any people.
Of course, recently, what was it, 2 days ago, when Muammar Gaddafi was captured and killed. Celebration? Yeah, but some people do that. I don't celebrate the death of any person, any man, even people who I don't like. It's to me that's a little bloodthirsty. But, everybody has their way, but I never celebrate anyone's death. It's, to me, like opportunistic and a little cruel and odd to me. It's not the Wizard of Oz, ding dong, the witch is dead, people chant. I mean, like, this is the real world, though. This is like people celebrate people getting killed, like the church people out of Lawrence, Wichita and whatnot, protesting dead soldiers, funerals and whatnot. To me, that's just cruel. Yeah, unusually so.
Right, but
even barbaric.
Right. So I think Gaddafi was overthrown largely by the CIA. Just the same kind of destabilization program that they're running in Iran. See, what a lot of people don't know, that's why those hikers got in such trouble. The United States is running a destabilization program that includes paying people billions of dollars to oppose the government. There was opposition already, but it's been accelerated by American cash. And they've been assassinating people, well-known people, professors, radio personalities, TV personalities. Everybody in Iran and that part of the world knows about it, but we don't know about it at all. So when the hikers, supposed hikers, with all this global devices they had, local positioning and whatnot, that's why they were suspect, because there are spies and agent provocateurs, hundreds and hundreds of Americans and Iranians in Iran trying to overthrow the government. Now, you could say they should, but from my point of view, that really should be a choice of the Iranian people, not the American people. If somebody came from another country here and started knocking off Tea Party people because they too much to the right, we'd be upset. We'd be ready to jump on them and fry them, But we can do that to other people, particularly if they can't hit back. That's why I say we have a bully foreign policy. If we were really warriors, we'd jump on Russia or China.
Or North Korea.
Right. But that's why everybody's trying to get, who figures they need it, some nuclear weapons, because they know they will not jump on you if you have that.
Absolutely. We're going to have to take a break right now, Lloyd, and when we come back, we will continue our discussion with Lloyd Daniel, educator, activist, here on 90.1 FM KKFI, Kansas City Community Radio. This is Urban Connections. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Occupy KC has declared this Sunday, October 23rd, a day of learning. It's a day to deepen our understanding of the world and one another. It's a teach-in with workshops, talks, and entertainment for the family from noon to 7 p.m. There are workshops on the Great Wealth Divide, on building coalitions and brainstorming alternatives. All are welcome at Occupy KC, just south of Liberty Memorial, across from the Fed.
This is federal worker Kenneth Bate of the Social Security Administration, and I encourage all of my federal worker friends to support KKFI 90.1 FM during the combined federal campaign. Donating a few dollars each pay period can help keep community radio on the air in Kansas City. Designate your tax-deductible donation to KKFI, CFC Agency Code 21994. Thank you for supporting community radio.
Natural Mystic, Bob Marley, and the Wailers. You're tuned to 90.1 FM, KKFI, Kansas City Community Radio. This is Urban Connections. I'm your host, Donna Wolfe. Our guest in studio today, activist, educator, author, Lloyd C. Daniel. Lloyd, we were going to talk about the truth about Afghanistan and the end of empire, but there's some other intertwining themes, I think, that are at play, that are blowing through the air.
Right.
We had the Arab Spring.
Right. Well, before we get to that, I would like to say that this commentary is on my website, which is www.lloyddaniel.info. That's INFO, lloyddaniel.info. And I've attempted to put it in some newspapers, but only the Kansas City Call would run it, and I want to praise the Call, let them know I appreciate it, Eric Wesson and Donna Stewart, because it's a 4-part series because it's sort of long, but they run 2 parts. The second part is in this week's Call, and the third and fourth will be upcoming. But brave journalism should be highlighted, and those who are afraid to rock the boat should admit that they are afraid, and not in the tradition of black journalism.
Yeah, because black journalism is, has a fearless and old tradition. I mean, against all odds, black folks were journalists and creating newspapers and disseminating information nationwide.
Right.
Long time ago, centuries ago. So in your article, I know one thing that might be scary to some people who are afraid of truth. You talk about WikiLeaks as a source of information.
WikiLeaks is important. It's as important as the Pentagon Papers were in the 70s, talking about Vietnam and how we were bombing civilians on purpose, bombing hospitals and schools and farms and civilian locations. From Kansas City, Phil Lawson and Cecil Williams, they went and stood in front of these buildings that had been bombed by Americans, along with Jane Fonda. And they called them all liars and hypocrites and unpatriotic and subject to communist propaganda. But when Daniel Ellsberg, a Pentagon analyst, began to see what was happening, he started saving those documents coming across his desk, taking them home, which was absolutely illegal. And eventually, one spring morning, he just stood on the Capitol steps and started reading them. He'd already given them to the New York Times, and that's why we know what the policy was. That's why Kissinger can't go to Spain, because they already said that as soon as you get to the airport, we're going to send you off to world court as a war criminal, which would be just. But the point is, they denied that they were bombing civilians on purpose, killed 2 million Vietnamese, mainly from the air, B-52 bombers, carpet bombing. That carpet bombing ran Pol Pot and them crazy in Cambodia, led to some extreme madness. But the point is, they denied it. But the Pentagon Papers, put out by Daniel Ellsberg, in fact, that's why the Watergate thing, Nixon tried to break into Ellsberg's psychiatrist's office to get something they could blackmail him with to stop talking about it. Today, WikiLeaks has told us what is really happening with American foreign policy. They would have never admitted that they were machine gunning a journalist on the ground unless the video came out that they had. And just like with the Pentagon Papers, this is not somebody's opinion. These are government documents, government videos. These are videos from the helicopter gunship machine gunning the journalists. So, yeah, WikiLeaks is important, and I'm glad to know what they're doing with my money.
In your paper, your commentary on Afghanistan, you talk about the Taliban and how they've become armed, indirectly, not too indirectly, by us.
Oh, yeah. A lot of that stuff they have is stuff we gave them to fight the Soviets. We just never anticipated that they would flip on us. And some of the stuff they're getting, too, is from off the black market, indirectly from Iran and from China. But they sell stuff on the black market all the time, and anybody who wants to go buy it does. But the Taliban is still using some of those old weapons from 20 years ago when they were fighting the Soviets. We armed them, built facilities for them. We blew up a lot of them since, but still that strategy and that training still exists. The second generation of Taliban are the ones who are fighting in the forefront now, the children of the original Taliban. Taliban means students. People don't even know that. And when there was a civil war in Afghanistan, that was the side we decided to back, and that because they said they were fighting the infidels from the Soviet Union. And so we didn't anticipate, being arrogant as we often are, that they would fight the infidels from North America too. So, we armed. It's more than blowback. We made sure they had weapons. But that is not the key, the weapons. The key is who can win the hearts and minds of the people, and the Taliban have far more outstripped us in that than we have beaten them. We're still foreign invaders to most Afghani people. And the arrogance of Hillary Clinton going to Pakistan and talking about what she won't tolerate, I mean, that led to demonstrations. Of course, they didn't cover them here, but people say, we're not your children. Don't tell us what you're not going to tolerate in our own country, You haven't seen the Pakistanis here in D.C. talking about what they won't tolerate from the Americans. I mean, it's just the arrogance is just crazy. They tried to tell Honduras that they had to keep the American bases there in Latin America. Well, Honduras says, if Honduras has bases in Florida, you can keep your bases here, but you have to get out. This is our country. So a lot of that has been percolating with the rise of not just the Arab Spring, but the rise of what is happening in Latin America with Morales, in Bolivia, and Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, and other democratic folks like Lula and Dilma in Brazil. Brazil, India, China, those are new rising powers. We've gone from a bipolar world, the United States and the Soviet Union running everything and everybody else basically non-aligned, to a multipolar world. And it's not just the United States. It's the United States, Russia, China, India, Brazil. And a lot of folks haven't figured out what America can do in these circumstances. And in many ways, it speaks to the decline in power, the same kind of decline that Britain suffered in France and Belgium and Germany, for that matter. And there's not a lot that can be done to resist that, because you can't bomb your way into power. Gunboat diplomacy is over. This is an economic struggle, competition, and a nation that is semi-literate is not in a position to compete with nations that are literate.
Absolutely.
It's
America being now a nation that is semi-literate.
It is. I mean, across the board. Kids in even so-called good schools come out not knowing anything about the culture, really not know anything about history or the future. Everybody takes history courses, but who's taking a future course, which is very common in other countries. Where's our country going and how are we going to get there, like in China? But we don't even talk about that. And so economic development is hard to do when the people are semi-literate or illiterate. Like in the joint, 75% of the people in the joint are functionally illiterate. So...
And there's a lot of people in the joint.
2 million.
Yeah.
Mostly African American and Latino. Mostly on drug charges. So if Health and Human Services and the Department of Labor say that people in the United States sell drugs and do drugs basically in proportion to their numbers in the country, meaning about 10% of the drug dealers and drug users are black. About 12% are Latino. The rest are white, basically. A few Asians, but basically the biggest group among drug dealers and drug users are white Americans, European Americans. But when you go to the penitentiary, why is 80% of the people of color? That's institutionalized racism, structural racism. That's why people like Herman Cain are either crazy or stupid. He reminds me of people in the barbershop get drunk and say anything and then apologize for it. You know, he was laughing about he didn't know the names of countries and who was running them. But that's cool if you're in the barbershop, okay? But if you're in Oval Office, you should know that.
Yeah. Herman Cain is a rising star in the Republican field of candidates for the presidency of the United States.
Yeah,
talk about the Republican candidates. Who they got?
Nobody. That's what I'm saying. That's why Obama's going to win. If they had a candidate. Well, you know, there are Republicans. I know a lot of Republicans from being at the State House. And their strategy is that black people are going to vote for Cain because he's black. And that will not get most black votes, but it will split the black vote. He might get 25%, and that'll be enough for Obama to lose certain key states in the Electoral College. But most black people are not that stupid, okay? They don't want to hear him say about how he got rich and how you could do that too. I mean, that Horatio Alger stuff died in the 1800s. I mean, if he really believes that, he needs a history lesson. He doesn't need to be president. He needs to go to school first.
I think what he said was, if you don't have a job and you're not rich, it's your fault.
Yeah, it might be, but probably not. You know, I know a lot of people who work well, smart, who got laid off. I know people who worked at Sprint and AT&T and all kind of places. They believed in the system. People who work for Ken Lay and these folks, Enron and all these folks. I told them, don't believe in the system. I told people, get your money out of your IRA. And they just like, Lloyd, you're just paranoid. That's what I'm saying. You're just paranoid.
Yeah.
401k too. So I said, but see, I know people who've lost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and now they sad, asking me who's hiring. I say, look, UPS is hiring part-time. You can get health care if you stay there a year. So, I mean, like, they was ridiculing me like 4 years ago, and I was telling them, get your money out because, you know, the stock market's going to go down. I said, oh, you sound like Lyndon LaRouche. I said, LaRouche is a right-wing, neo-fascist, but I'm telling you the facts. He ain't, it's even a broke clock is right twice a day. You see what I'm saying? So they didn't, and I know people who lost their house, boat, car, never thought they'd be on food stamps. So I'm saying you can work the system, but you need to do for self. And when the nation talks about that, they're right. If you do for self, figure that out, everything else is gravy. But if you depend on the system only access to the system, well, you have a right to access. We fight in the wars, pay our taxes. If you don't pay the taxes, they'll put your ass in Leavenworth. Okay? But we also have a responsibility to ourselves and our ancestors and those who come after us to do for ourselves, especially people of color. Set up our own radio stations, our own newspapers, our own businesses in general, our own places of worship, which we do well. But we need to do that all along and balance that. If you look at successful groups of immigrants or folks who were brought here in captivity, if you do for yourself and gain access to the system, that's a balance that can move you and your people along. Herman Cain is a pure believer in entrepreneurial and monopoly capitalism, and that is what is in crisis worldwide. I mean, that's like integrating into, as James Baldwin put it, into a burning house.
Mm. Talk about American exceptionalism. Where's that concept right now? I mean, I still hear it bandied about.
We've had it all along. It's the modern version of manifest destiny.
And define manifest destiny for those of us who are uncertain
Well,
about that term.
in the 1800s, and even before, Americans, particularly wealthy Americans, and those who believe the propaganda of the ruling class, believe that God gave America a special privilege, a special place to do what it wanted to do and do what it wanted to do to people around the world. It was manifest. It was manifest in North America, taking the land from the Indians. It was manifest in the Caribbean, jumping on Cuba, defeating Spain and Cuba. It was manifest that we should, engage in World War I. Now, World War II, we got in late after Stalingrad. But the idea that the United States is an exception to the world and not part of the world is delusional. And when a nation becomes delusional, it can make a lot of mistakes. Germany had that same problem. A Third Reich was supposed to last, 3,000 years, last about 15. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying you get so arrogant that you overlook reality and start believing your own propaganda is dangerous. The United States of America, let me say it clearly, does not have the right, wisdom, or ability to run planet Earth, even if they really, really, really want to. Every nation that's taken that approach has ended in disaster. Going all the way back to Egypt and Rome, Greece. You can't run the whole world. The world won't let you.
So what about the United States and Saudi Arabia? Talk about that relationship.
The royal family in the kingdom, as they say, the Faisal family, etc., and their hangers-on, we're playing rent-a-cop for them. The same kind of uprising that's taking place across the Arab world, we are counting on places like Saudi Arabia to help quell the people's demand for democracy. If we were really in Afghanistan and these other places for democracy, we would change or advocate that Saudi Arabia change. If we really in Afghanistan for women, why don't we invade Saudi Arabia? They don't even let women drive. Most men and women can't vote in Saudi Arabia. Okay? So they allow us to stage troops there. We got troops on the ground. This is one of the things that triggered Al-Qaeda in the first place, to turn from the Soviet Union to Saudi Arabia. There have been a number of attacks there that don't get a lot of press in the United States because they say that the fundamentalist Muslims say that the Saudi government is allowing American boots on the birthplace of Muhammad. In fact, if we jump on countries, invade countries because they invade other countries, talking about the Arab Spring, there were people in Bahrain attempted to do the same thing that was done in Tunisia and Egypt, etc., and we're on the verge of toppling the dictatorship. And the Saudis sent troops, tanks, helicopters across the causeway across the sea into Bahrain and killed people, shot people with anti-aircraft guns, etc. We didn't say a peep. We did hold up the $35 million temporarily that we're going to give them in military aid, because it had already been promised. Mm-hmm. But the point is, if you run with gangsters, quit talking about democracy. Mm-hmm. If your goal was democracy, you would not allow Saudi Arabia to invade Bahrain without consequences.
Talk about your take on the United States' relationship with Israel and Palestine. And okay. Why? Why is that?
Let me say this. Since 1948, the Palestinians have not had a nation. They deserve one. Britain had Palestine as a protectorate. You can't give away something that you stole, okay? And for that matter, the European Jews did not, first of all, go to Palestine. They were talking about Argentina, okay?
Many went there, though, didn't they?
Yeah.
I think a lot of Nazis went to South America,
A lot of people did. Yeah, Herzog was talking about Argentina. Okay. So some people say Israel's the 51st state. People say that America's giving away all its wealth to foreigners. This is not true. They've taken jobs over there. That's true. But if you look at all the foreign aid America gives to all the countries it gives aid to, it's less than 0.5% of our national budget. Okay? Half of that foreign aid that we do give goes to two countries, Israel and Egypt. I don't know if Egypt's going to keep getting theirs because they have opened up the border with Israel again, and
Palestine again.
Oh yeah, with Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
Israel's border, it's with Palestine, and Palestinians are flowing freely back and forth, and I'm sure there are guerrillas too. And Israel is in a position, I guess, it feels need to negotiate because they've let prisoners go, about 1,000, still about 4,000 in there in Israel. And they've been running Palestine like a prison camp, determining what food they can get and what resources and et cetera, et cetera. Jimmy Carter's called it an apartheid state. And there are those around the world who feel that Israel will not change unless it's about money, because this whole thing is about money. That the disinvestment movement against Israel is starting in California on some of the college campuses. And that's what led the apartheid regime of South Africa to change its mind. It was about money. What about what was right or what was honest or what was good? It sprung Mandela eventually. So I'm saying that I think people need to take a different approach and recognize that the people who run Israel picked up Judaism in Europe. They're not the biological descendants of the original Hebrews. That's Solomon and Sheba in the country of Abyssinia, which is now Ethiopia. Mm-hmm. And so there are more Jews in Ethiopia than there are in Israel. Mm. And people, they're full of Hollywood's version of the Bible. A lot of Christians haven't read the Bible cover to cover. What they did see was Greatest Story Ever Told, the Bible, King of Kings, which basically lets Jesus be blue-eyed and blonde-haired. But whether you like it, blue-eyed and blonde-haired. But whether you like it or not, Jesus was a Palestinian. Mm. He was born in Bethlehem, moved to Nazareth, went to Egypt to study. Oh. He was a Palestinian. So Jeffrey Chandler can't play Jesus. That's why I didn't go see Gibson's movie, because I ain't watching no more white Jesus movies. Mm-hmm. Now, if Spike Lee do one, or somebody like that, I'll go see that. But that is not just historically inaccurate, but that's a form of cultural aggression, too. Yeah. That's why little kids, if you ask them, is Jesus white, black, Chinese, or what? They'll say, oh, he's white. They ask, is God? Oh, he's the son of God. Is God, what nationality is God? These grade school kids, they say, oh, he's white too. I say, okay, but what does it mean for a young black kid or a young Latino kid to think of God as white? If there are more Chinese than anything, why don't they say God is Chinese if he's made in his image? So I'm saying the propaganda coming out of Hollywood is more than entertainment. A lot of people define themselves by images from on the big screen.
Absolutely true.
There's not been a big movie about Jesus suggesting that he was a man of color and a Palestinian at that. Mm. In fact, Jesus didn't speak any European dialect. He spoke Amharic, which if you listen to Amharic speakers, they sound a lot like the Palestinians of today. People say, oh, did he speak Roman? No, Jesus was in a Arab country, Hebrew, occupied by Europeans, the Romans. See, that's the story. He went in and threw out the money changers, the Jewish elite, the Hebrew elite that had been working with the Romans. That's a revolutionary tale. Jesus was a nonviolent revolutionary. And to use his name and bombing other countries and praying before you go bomb somebody, that's blasphemy to me. Jesus didn't say bomb your enemies. He said love your enemies. Don't be fooling with Jesus, see?
Yeah.
Let Jesus speak for himself. Absolutely. Don't give them Bibles with everything Jesus say in red. You need to study that.
All right. We're going to take another break, and when we come back, we will continue our conversation with our guest, Lloyd C. Daniel, in studio with us here today. Lloyd is an educator, an author, an activist, former state representative in the Missouri legislature, and he has written a piece that's being published in 4 parts in the Kansas City Call newspaper. It's called The Truth About Afghanistan and the End of Empire. You're tuned to 90.1 FM, KKFI, Kansas City Community Radio. This is Urban Connections. We'll be back in a moment.
If you listen
flowing through the air. We have a natural mystic here with us today in studio, Lloyd C. Daniel, native Kansas Cityan. Well, you grew up in Kansas City, Missouri. Author, educator, activist, political analyst, and former state representative. What district did you represent in the Missouri House?
42nd.
That's what is that geographically?
Van Brunt on the east, Paseo on the west. Van Brunt on the west, Paseo on the east, 39th Street on the north, and basically 52nd Street on the south.
Okay, so the urban...
Paseo High School, same high school I went to. Gates on 47th Street. Yeah, urban core.
Urban core.
No doubt.
Serious urban
Still
core.
my neighborhood.
Yeah, all right. We've been talking about, really, world events, current, past. Well, what do you see going forward? And I also wanted to ask you to comment on the Martin Luther King statue that they have in Washington, D.C. right now.
It's a beautiful statue. I'm glad they put it there. Sculptor did it. It looks good. But I haven't seen all the quotes on it. But I was listening to the people. The only one really tried to raise the real king was his daughter. She dropped science on him. A lot of people are in a process, consciously and unconsciously, to defang Dr. King, to make him more moderate than he was, less revolutionary than he was, in fact, even less brave than he was. Because he didn't get assassinated by COINTELPRO, J. Edgar Hoover's assassination and discrediting program, because he was talking about back-of-the-bus issues. In fact, he lost black support and union support when he started talking about the war in Vietnam and why we shouldn't be there. In fact, a lot of people want to freeze frame him in 1963 when he did the I Have a Dream speech. But he did other speeches. He lived for 5 more years, and he continued to evolve. And the speech that he won a Grammy for, people don't even know that, he won it posthumously, was the speech why I opposed the war in Vietnam. It was put out on Black Farm Records, which at that time was a subsidiary of Motown. I remember buying it as soon as it came out. I heard it was out. And what he said was of consequence, including, I cannot speak out against violence in the ghettos unless I speak out against the greatest purveyor of violence on planet Earth, my own government. He also went on to say, let me just, as a footnote, I guess a caveat instead, China is an officially atheist country. That's their right. I'm not mad at them for that. I'm not an atheist, but they are, and an officially atheist. So most of the people who are religious in China are Buddhists, who the Republicans say are in a cult, okay?
So, along with the Mormons.
Yeah, the Mormons, everybody who's not a born-again fundamentalist Baptist is in a cult, which is an odd way of seeing the world. Everybody's wrong except you. But one of the things he said was, Dr. King, in that speech, Why I Oppose the War in Vietnam, it was his last speech. In fact, it was the stump speech that he gave for the last 6 or 8 months of his life, the speech that he was given in Memphis before he got killed. That ends with, I've seen the promise. You know, I might not get there with you, because he knew what COINTELPRO was doing. He knew how hated he was. People forget, Dr. King was the most hated man in America. People rock back and forth and sing We Shall Overcome now, but when that song would get you shot, most people are afraid to say that and afraid to walk with King. Okay? It's easy now. You know, it's acceptable now. Still a lot of people don't like him, but I mean, he was hated. He was hated like Bin Laden. Okay? And he was peaceful.
How dare he want, justice and equality?
How dare he could move out of bus
parity.
issues? Yeah, talk about economic parity and poor people and the United States foreign policy. That's not your business. Roy Wilkins told him that. AFL-CIO George Meany told him that. You just stick with nigger business. Do that, He was larger than that. He was larger than most of the people who challenged him, okay? Deeper, too. But he said, this is like a year before he was shot. And it's on that album. And if you want to hear it, you don't have to listen to me. Go to the internet and look up the speech, Dr. King's why I oppose the war in Vietnam. And then you will hear a deep speech, deeper than I Have a Dream speech. But in that speech he says, and don't let anybody make you think God chose America to be a divine messianic force, to be a sort of policeman for the whole world. God has a way of standing before nations with judgment. And it seems as though I can hear God saying to America, you're too arrogant. And if you don't change your ways, I will rise up and break the backbone of your power and place it in the hands of a nation that doesn't even know my name. Be still and know that I'm God. Now, consider the United States owes China over $1 trillion. That was prophetic. That wasn't just deep. That was anticipatory.
Lloyd Daniel, our guest in studio today. If you have in the next 10 minutes that we have for the program today, if you have a question or a comment for our guest, give us a call here in the studio. The number is 816-931-5534, 816-931-KKFI. And we're talking about Dr. King, and a lot of folks were, I think, conjecturing or guessing whether or not that he would support the Occupy Wall Street, the Occupy Kansas City, the Occupy
I think
America
he would. It was about grassroots movement. Being a celebrity and being a superstar in a movement, of course, he couldn't stay. A lot of people have to recognize, too, that the regular folks who had to face the Klan after Messiah and his band had gone on to another town, they braved, too.
Yes,
little just dusty towns where the sheriff was the judge, was the police and all that. You got to give them credit. The people was in their best Sunday clothes getting washed down the street, and hit by billy clubs crossing bridges and stuff. See, that's who really made the movement. Absolutely. And movements work that way. They come from the bottom up,
that's right,
not from the top down. So Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street, Occupy San Francisco, Occupy L.A., etc., is good. And this is the first democratic and progressive mass movement to sweep the nation since the 60s, really.
That's good to know.
Yeah, so I don't understand anybody who would say King wouldn't support that. And King would be talking about America's foreign policy just like he did then, with little support. But he won over a lot of younger people, Stokely Carmichael and Jesse and a lot of other people who saw him as too moderate, because that was brave. To challenge United States foreign policy in the mid-'60s.
He had a relationship with Malcolm as well.
That's right. I have a picture at home of him and Dr. King and Dr. King and Malcolm's shaking hands, cheesing.
Yes,
both
right.
of them just all teeth.
That's right. We got a caller on the line. Caller, are you there?
Yeah, comrade.
Yes, I.
From behind enemy lines.
From liberated
My
territory.
brother, so beautiful to hear your voice. Yeah, Brother Ron McMillan checking in.
All right. How you doing, Ron?
Hey, I'm blessed, and it's so good to hear your wisdom. And show you right. I was thinking about when you was talking about how people didn't follow King or appreciate King.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't learn to truly love the man until he was 10 years dead,
right.
from his readings.
Right.
And see how powerful he was and his other works. And a lot of us are like that. But the question I would like to put to you, my brother, is how do we at this point, we've never been here before, how do we learn to love and hate our president as we navigate? Because he ain't king, he ain't no minister, he's a politician.
Right, he's a politician out of Chicago.
And we sort of hook him up and try to make him king and stuff, but how does the masses learn how to, we love our brother, we love our seed, but then we see him in the belly of the beast.
Right.
And the policies and stuff that have come out of there for as long as we've been marching.
Right.
And we finally get there, and one of us sitting up that road.
It's hard for a lot of people to see, but I'm saying...
I'm going to shut up and let you drop it, brother. God bless you.
God
Good
bless
to hear
you,
you
too.
again.
All right,
Thanks for calling Ron McMillan, one of the original hosts and producers of Urban Connections here on 90.1 FM.
Right.
Get that in there. Yes, hold on, caller. Lloyd, please, go ahead.
Yes, some people asked me the other day, where have I been? I haven't been anywhere. I've been in my skin. I've been teaching at Penn Valley and working on my website and doing traveling. I've been speaking a lot out of town, so I'm out of town a lot. But I haven't gone anywhere. I'm doing the same thing, just a little broader base. But check out my website. and you'll see what I'm writing. I'm a teacher, and I'm teaching at Penn Valley. I'm a writer, and I'm writing on my internet. I'm a speaker, and I've been speaking in different college campuses across the country, and nightclubs, and places, parks, and stuff like that, arts festivals, etc. But we should love the brother, but we should not hate him. We don't need to hate him. We should hate. But we need to love him and encourage him, and let him know that even though he's got difficulties with Congress, etc., there are some things he can do. If he gets reelected, we could maybe pressure him to do some executive orders like Roosevelt did. Some of that stuff could be done. He has the authority to do that, but I think he hesitates because he needs to get in again. That's why he didn't make the banks promise in writing to put some of that loan money, that bailout money, into small business loans, etc. So, but he needs to be encouraged to do what King talked about. And it is ironic that we finally get there, and then, we got Bush too, but chocolate Bush, especially in terms of foreign policy. I think we have to think more critically. I don't think we're brainwashed the way Kane says, but we are used to voting for the Democrat every time. And if it's a black Democrat, how can we resist? Well, I'm probably going to vote for Obama again. How could I vote for Perry? How could I vote for Kane? How could I vote for any of those people? That's why they don't have any credible candidates, So, again, I have been, as of late, voting for Democrats and voting for the lesser of two evils. But see, both of them evil. These are Demopublicans. I don't think this is a one-party state. Both of them property parties. There's no other party. You got one wing in a property party that's liberal and one wing that's conservative, but both of them property party. Both capitalist property party, monopoly capitalist property party. So I'm going to have to vote not for the lesser of two evils, but I have to vote against the eviler of two lessers.
Okay. We got another caller on the air. Caller, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Thanks for holding on. You're on the air at 90.1 FM.
Oh, thank you for taking my call. I want to really applaud Lloyd Daniels for his continual effort to be a humanitarian here in Kansas City. And I've got one question for him, and that would be, how would he go about mobilizing people to where they could feel re-empowered and impact our government?
Thank you for your call.
That's a big question. I say start with the people you know, and then they work with the people they know. Use social media. Do stuff for our people. Don't just protest and walk around. People need food. Work with people growing food and passing out food, and help engage the people who are eating the food to grow food too. I'm saying that this whole idea of grassroots mobilization, that will lead to a sense of empowerment, and in fact, actual empowerment. Look at the issues that people face and do stuff about that. Protest on that, march on that, work on that, raise money for that. Set up job banks, okay? Work with people who are hiring and let people know. Set up a network of folks who know what jobs are out there. Training programs that exist. Let people know where they are and how to get in them. Outside of Kansas City, there was a great strategic analyst and leader in Guinea-Bissau by the name of Amilcar Cabral. That's Amilcar, Cabral, Cabral, who said that people function first on basic goods and services, second on ideologies and theologies. And so I'm saying if we want to do mass organizing, let's ask the masses what they're trying to do and how they're trying to do it, and help them do that. That was why when the Panthers came to Kansas City, I don't know if you're old enough to remember that, they spent a lot of time showing revolutionary movies and selling a revolutionary newspaper. But they didn't really catch on with the masses of people until they started asking the people, what do you want? And the main thing they wanted was women. They were going door to door in a day, and it was mainly talking to women. They said, well, my baby, do you have some food? I mean, I'd be hungry in school and stay awake, be able to stay awake. This is before commodities, before King got killed, before food stamps. And so the Panthers grudgingly started going to grocery stores and getting biscuits and bacon and eggs and whatnot and cooking breakfast. That's when they caught on. They were still showing the revolutionary movies, Off the Pig and Battle of Algiers and all that. Bringing
No More Brothers in Jail.
That's right. Right. And bringing guest speakers who were articulate and beautiful and handsome and the whole thing. But when they started feeding people, because that's what the people wanted, they said, well, we're not no breakfast people. Well, that's what we're going to have to do. That's when the stuff jumped off, because then the mamas and the kids started saying, well, maybe that newspaper is good as these biscuits, you know, or maybe that ideology, that philosophy is good as this bacon, you know. So that is how you mobilize people on a grassroots level. Ask them what you're trying to do, help them try to do that, and then after you do that, then you can drop some stuff on them about some other stuff they might not know about. That's how it works.
All right. One more call. Caller, are you there?
Yes, I am.
On the line, on the air at 90.1 FM. What's your name? What part of town you calling from?
This is Imani calling, and I just kind of want to make a prediction. I really do believe that the CIA helped along the Arab Spring by using the same tactics that they've used here in America with infiltration and assassination of bin Laden and Gaddafi. There's some really mysterious circumstances surrounding their deaths. They won't anybody see the body. So I really do believe that the CIA has its hand in that. And I think that those people were toppled because the United States wants to see leadership in Arab countries that will support corporate interests here. And I think that's the main reason why Israel is so attached to that piece of land. They're using it as an offshore commercial base. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your call. One more. Caller, are you there?
Hello?
Hi, caller. You're on the air at 90.1 FM. What's your name? What part of town you calling from?
Greetings, Donna. This is Nia.
Hi, Nia. How you doing?
I'm good.
Good.
Listening to the show. And I was wondering if the brother might have any ideas. I've always been brainstorming about what we can do for the homeless population.
Okay.
And we have several patients that come to the mental health emergency department where I work that are homeless and get turned away because they're homeless. A lot of times they're not even believed that they might be suicidal. They just think they're just trying to come get some food and a place to sleep. But I think we'd all be a little suicidal if we were living under a bridge. But my thoughts have been, with all these abandoned school buildings and hospitals in town, you know, I could see them being a haven for people to be able to have shelter and have job training and have, you know, jobs that help beautify the city and the community, and just wondering where some funding probably could come from, possibly the government, or did he have any ideas on, you know, who to go to for that kind of funding?
Thank you. I think that's a great idea.
It's a great idea, and I think the money is there. There's federal money, there's state money, but there's also local money. I mean, we need to talk about a bond issue for the homeless. I mean, if you can build a Sprint Center in the downtown and all that, why can't you house some people in the richest country in the world? If there's money for the power and light, there's money for the power and light. 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 There's money for the power and light.